Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome. Hope you're having a really wonderful open education conference so far, virtually. My name is Steele Wagstaff, and I'll be introducing today's panel. The presentation that we wanted to share with you today is going to be very exciting. We've got a 25-minute session, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to get all of our presenters in. I'm trying to share my screen here, and hopefully you see my screen now being shared. Someone can nod. Okay, great. So the presentation is called It's Alive, Reviving OER with Interactive Content to Create a Living Online Course. You're at Open Ed 2020. And if you'd like to see the slides, there's not a ton of information in the slide. This is mostly going to be a live panel presentation discussion, but the slides are findable there at this bit.ly URL, bit.ly/O open, E ed, A alive. I want to quickly introduce our presenters today. Really excited to have these three wonderful women on this panel. The first presenter will be Brenna Clark-Gray. She's the coordinator of educational technologies at Thompson Rivers University, where her research interests include open tenure processes, scholarly podcasting, and care-centered pedagogy. I just loved reading that sentence. Thanks, Brenna. Before taking the role, she spent 9 years as a community college professor, teaching English literature and composition. The second panelist is Adiola Agoke. She's the Associate Director of the African Language Program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she teaches courses in sociocultural and applied linguistics. Her passion is bringing research to program design and instruction. And she also brings hands-on teaching methods to African language pedagogy and provides training for all of the instructors in their African language program who teach a total of 6 different African languages across a pretty diverse program. So thank you for being here, Adiola. And finally, our last panelists, I hope will be able to join us. We're having some technical problems. Oh no. Her name is Michelle Nakano. She's a horticulture instructor at Kwantlen Polytechnic and an instructional design consultant. She has some BC campus grants to publish an open textbook on plant identification and to update an introductory biology textbook with interactive activities. It appears that Michelle may not be able to join us with connection problems.
She's here still.
She is. Oh, wonderful. Okay. So glad. Whew, I was really sweating there. So I'm going to say that's a quick introduction to our panelists, and I want to do a little bit of framing before I turn it over to them. The first piece of framing that I wanted to say is that, as many of you know, there's been a big trend in the open education and education generally, moving away from the print textbook and towards this idea of courseware. And in lots of cases, when it's proprietary courseware, students are paying rental access for limited term to a digital textbook and then a homework platform. So it's the same big publishers we've come to know and have feelings about, but the business model is a little bit different. And the reason why they've been moving from print to digital courseware is important to understand. For them, the profits are a little bit higher because fewer print books mean fewer resales or secondhand books competing with new book sales. Every semester, all of the students sign up. They have a captive audience. If a courseware platform is assigned, there's not really a practical alternative. You've got to use the courseware package. And third, they're interested in the data analytics. If you're having students click through a homework platform, that publisher then knows a lot about what students are doing to learn. And the idea or the hope is that they might be able to monetize or sell that or data analysis to the universities down the road. If you want to learn a little bit more about the landscape here, Spark published a really nice report largely about open access. And there's an appendix here that gives a bit more information about why publishers are doing this kind of courseware transition. The big premise that we had was that, yes, that's true. And yes, we can make open textbooks. Many of us have done that. But if we really want to think about student learning, the premise is instructors can make engaging, meaningful, and openly licensed learning experiences. They can do it themselves or with others or with their students, and they can do it using open source platforms and tools. In this presentation, we'll mostly be talking about Pressbooks, about H5P, and about Hypothesis. As a very quick example, I just wanted to show, here's an example of a book that, it's a learning activity example that I built to teach poetry for a literature course. Here you'll see this book was published in Pressbooks. We've got a bit of introductory material to the poem. Here's an H5P interactive activity. After they've read this, the student can check their understanding, get immediate real-time feedback. They could also see a glossary term that explains a bit more, another glossary term that explains a bit more, or even open an annotation layer and see a question or a prompt here that's built into the book. Later on, they come down a bit further and they see here in the book, there's even more stuff built into the annotation layer. I've got an image with the historical marker. I've got a conversation in which someone shared a video about this pawpaw fruit. And then after they've taken the poem, there's another kind of set of interactive quizzes. These ones have some hints or feedback before they take the assessment. And it's a multi-part activity. This one has fill in the blanks. And you could see real-time feedback here as I'm checking my answers. I could see a hint, and I could move through and do this assessment. I could check the words. There's lots of different assessment types. And there's even the ability to do interactive video. So here at this point in the video,
an appropriate poem to do since we are.
We'll see, okay, there's a pop-up where you could do a question or an interactive kind of content. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor for the kinds of things that you could do. And now I'm going to turn it over to each of our panelists to talk about what specifically they have done or are doing to make this possible. And you'll see a big range of examples. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end. The first person up is going to be Brenna. Brenna, take us away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. And thanks so much, Steele, for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm joining you from Tecumloops Te Secwépemc in unceded Secwépemc Ulu, which you may know as Kamloops, BC, or you may not know at all. I'm here to talk about a BC Campus grant that I am leading, which is to create these kind of H5P interactions for a textbook called Writing for Success, first Canadian edition. Steele's got an example of the kind of interactive. We're still working through the project, so our integration isn't complete yet, but I'm particularly proud of this exercise. It's a thesis development exercise. And the intention was to really mimic something that I used to do in class with students all the time, which is walk them through what they need to do to create a good thesis statement. So answer the prompt, or identify the prompt, and then identify the key terms, and then some free writing. And I like H5P as a structure for doing this with students because I often found when I gave these prompts just in, a discussion forum or something, it was difficult for students to see how the pieces built upon one another, whereas this H5P interactive gives them a really clear sense of how the pieces connect to one another as they move through the exercise. We talk a lot in my academic writing classes about the value of free writing, so you'll see a lot of time devoted to that. I'm not sure everybody devotes all of the time they should. But the nice thing is that this walks them through some practice, a reinforcement of the rules of thesis statements, and then an opportunity to review what they've done. And this is using the documentation tool in H5P. So it actually prints out a text file that they can then submit to an instructor or take to office hours to get some hands-on feedback from the instructor. So I really like this as a way of walking through students through a process when I can't be with them face to face. It's something that I would devote a lot of class time to in face-to-face world, but don't always have that opportunity. So might not be able to make it through all the steps, Steele, but it gives folks a sense of what it looks like. And again, you can reinforce the rules, remind students of the exercise. And yeah, we'll let Steele move through it. So it gives them a rating. So they can rate their own based on the criteria. They can say like, oh, I see how I did or didn't meet the criteria as specified. And then it ends with a document export, again, that they can download, take to office hours or submit to an instructor. So it's a way of being hands-on with students when you can't be with them. This is the kind of thing that we'll be integrating into the Writing for Success textbook so that students have that opportunity even when they're in a distance learning scenario like we are in right now. We go back to the slides. Yay. Okay. So I gave a little bit of an overview of the project, which you don't really need to know, and we're tight on time. What's nice about this project, though, is we have a really great team. We've got 2 subject matter experts, 4 members from our open learning production staff at TRU. Thompson Rivers University has a large distance learning division, and 2 student research assistants who are learning how to use H5P, but they're also giving us really concrete feedback on what works and what doesn't in the existing textbook and where they would like help. So one of the students, their first task was just to read the textbook, and one of the students came back to me and said, we need a flashcard summary at the end of every chapter. And I would never have thought of that, but we do need a flashcard summary at the end of every chapter. So it's useful to have. And again, this is part of a BC Campus grant that's really looking at enhancing existing OER with H5P resources. Sorry, next slide. Yeah, perfect. So, Steele has already talked about the why. I won't go into it too much, but I really do think that particularly the combination of H5P and Pressbooks can mimic the functionality and extend it because of the focus on formative feedback. So helping students to improve. I noticed that a lot of the homework systems, particularly when they're being sold to instructors, are really focused on the summative aspect. There's quizzes. You can get marks back from students. So H5P's focus on formative, I think, is a stronger pedagogical tool. And then it also offers an instructional design opportunity to help shape how the tools are used. So integrating H5P into your OER when you're creating them for external purpose gives you a little bit more opportunity to suggest how each resource gets used. Something I've been in conversation with Steele about a lot in the last year is a need to really maximize accessibility here. So I'm very aware of our print users. TRU Open Learning serves an incarcerated population in addition to other student populations. We also have large numbers of students learning remotely, large numbers of Indigenous students learning on reserves, for example, where consistent access to internet is an issue. One of the things that I'm really interested as we move forward the integration between H5P and Pressbooks is looking at those H5P exercises that are page 1 printable. So the first page of the interactive, it's a word search. Why don't we just print the word search instead of sending students to the web? So that's where I'm looking as we expand this so that it's a great resource, not just for students who can live and learn online, but for those who do require the print version of Pressbooks. And I'm sure I'm over my 5 minutes and speaking very quickly, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Steele.
Thanks, Brenna, so much. It's hard to fit into a micro presentation, especially labor and time and love, but I appreciate you doing your best to take a shot at it. Our next presenter is, as we said, Adiola Agoke. Adiola, we'll turn over to you and take us away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Steele, for that introduction. I'm going to be talking about Pressbook and how we use it in the Department of African Cultural Studies, UW-Madison. So basically, I coordinate the African Language Program and I teach courses in African sociocultural linguistics and applied linguistics. And one thing, the approach that we have used in a way that is really specific for language learning in our department is to collaborate with students. So we do more of teacher-learner collaboration, and then we engage the Pressbook platform to use the H5P such that students who are learning the language themselves are able to create materials that are useful to them, and these materials are also made public online to other learners of languages. And one thing that is really interesting about the way that we use Pressbook in our department is that languages that are not generally taught, in the department or elsewhere on campus, students from different fields of work, from maybe in business, in medical sciences and all of that, are able to just use the Pressbook platform to, conduct their research, do their language learning and language practice and all of that. And so I'm going to show you some of the examples of how we engage the Pressbook platform to develop different African languages that students are trying to use. So I'm going to turn over to Steele to please share. Okay, 1 second.
Is my screen still visible? Okay, we want to look at the Arabic example first, Adiola?
Yes.
Okay.
So 1 second. Yes. So here is the Arabic example. So this is a student who has worked on the Arabic vocabulary in politics. So after listing the vocabulary of different words that are related to politics, and then at the end there is this H5P check questions that students have, so you can practice and click on it and then drag and drop answers and see if your answers are correct or not. And then that way students are able to connect the content at the beginning of the lesson to what they are trying to work on. And that example right there is an example of drag and drop. Students can move and drag some of those contents, the vocabulary, to see if they're able to glean the exact vocabulary for each of those, vocabulary on politics in Arabic. And I think students have really found this platform very useful to develop their vocabulary. And I'll quickly move on to another one in another language that a student worked on, and this is Akan Tui. So this Tui is spoken in Ghana, in western part of Africa. And so this student is teaching something on introductory lesson on greetings in Akan Tui. So generally we have all of these languages, arranged on Pressbook, and students continue to add materials to it to develop relevant chapters that are focused on specific topics. And then, so if you look at this place, there is listening practice. So students also try to, link other materials outside of Pressbook into Pressbook, and then other learners can click on that to assess how listening practice is done. And then scrolling down towards the bottom part, yeah, so this is where our student is using the H5P again for assessment. So if you look at these, students are also doing some check question. So you can drag and drop and then check if the answer is correct or not. And yes, so one good thing here is that they are able to see if their answers are correct, if their answers are wrong. So one beautiful thing is that it's not just putting those words out there or teaching other learners about less commonly taught languages, but offering them the opportunity to also practice, some of these languages and see how they work by just using the H5P. Thank you, still. Yeah, those are more examples of how they work and the answers that students get when they try to use the H5P that we develop on Pressbook. So I'm going to stop there for the next presenter. Thank you so much, Steele.
Thank you, Adiola. Our next presenter is Michelle, who have been told is in the room and is ready to present. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Oh, so glad to hear it. Hi, Michelle. Let me pull up your slide.
Hi, Steele. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much. Greetings from the unceded traditional nation of the Coast Salish people. As Steele introduced earlier, my project has involved grants from BC Campus as well in the creation of an open textbook for students of plant identification. And Steele and I are going to show you a few examples of the visual possibilities that H5P provides. So feel free to go to the examples. Here's chapter 1. I was so proud when I completed this page of text, and yet I knew that from a learner's standpoint, this was not very exciting. So I ventured over and clicked on the H5P button and created my first little drag and drop. And so after that, it was wide open. And of course, plant identification is in fact a visual discipline. And so while terminology is useful, it's more about the visual pattern recognition. So as we move on to some other examples, I'll let you move forward into this one about leaf recognition. As you can see, there's lots of terminology, but students apply this in the field. And so as we get to the end of this review of this material, then I have this lovely tool called hotspots, where we can bring in an image and students can actually test their recognition of the terms associated with the characteristics of individual simple leaves as well as the compound leaf that you see here. The next one is an example where we're looking at plant family characteristics because we put all of these patterns together so we can recognize the families that plants are actually part of. And in this particular H5P example, the students, a careful collection of Creative Commons images where students would see the structure of particular inflorescence and flower types that belong to certain families. And then we are able to do some pattern recognition and also sequencing of plants according to family type. And of course, we've got some of the sort of identifiable genera there, and students can test their success with that. So that family recognition is really valuable. And the final example is at the end of the book, and H5P became very happily used by students for practicing getting to know plants that they need to be able to identify for assessment purposes. And so here is an example of flashcards. Students can test their recall and then check the correct botanical name, common name, and family name. And so H5P has been very, very helpful. We're bringing all the different types of information, pattern recognition, as well as I've appreciated just the sheer quality of the images and the visual possibilities. So I hope it'll give you some ideas. Thanks, Steele.
Wow, thanks everybody. So that was the kind of panel presentation. I can't believe we did 3 of them in the time frame. So what we wanted to make sure is that there were time for other people to ask questions. I've been trying to monitor the chat, and I saw that most of the questions have been answered already in the chat. The question that I have for the panelists are, you all made it sound so easy, so fluid, so smooth when you're presenting, but how hard was it to get started for each of you or for your students? Like you mentioned using Pressbooks H5P. What was getting started like for all of you with the activities that you did?
Well, I'll just mention for me, it was an exploration. It was a discovery. And I think that's one of the reasons I kind of have gotten behind H5P, because it is so appealing and it is accessible. And somehow they have put it together with the colors and the quality of image in a way that you're happy to use it. It doesn't create a lot of barriers. So I found it as more fun than anything, actually.
Sorry, you're going to hear my toddler in the background. Yeah, I find that if you're comfortable with web forms, the nice thing about H5P is that it's very straightforward to start messing around with. You can go in and everything is really clearly laid out. What is expected of you is really clearly laid out, and you can try things and see. I find where it sometimes gets difficult is you think that one type of interaction is going to be the best for what you want to achieve, and sometimes it's not till you're finished that you realize actually there's something else that would work better. But in general, just jumping into H5P is really easy. I had never used it before about a year ago, and now I love it and apply it all the time. So if you're comfortable with like filling in a Google form, you can make an H5P object.
Yeah, in the language instruction, it's a little bit different because it's more focused on the learners than on the teacher. So, well, I wouldn't want to speak a lot about myself, but about how my students are able to navigate the process of using the H5P and Pressbook, as a platform. So generally, like other speakers have already said, that it's pretty easy. But one thing that also motivates the students is that these students are they are in the self-instructional model of learning. So Pressbook is already integrated into the syllabus. So it's not something that they are doing outside of their learning. So in the course syllabus, we already have the Pressbook there, the links for practice and all of that. So it's it's like a small section of their learning. So I walk them through the process. You do it this way. And then after that, they begin to mess around with it. And then gradually they are there. So it's just a process. And I think students have been finding it very useful.
Lots of great questions in the chat. I don't know which one then to focus on and which to answer. I know we're coming very close to end of time. Rachel, what's our actual time stop?
So we're at time right now. I'm going to stop the recording.